Where have you been during the civil rights movement? Attorney Herbert Henderson has been in the front lines. I'm Dan Ringer, and I'll talk with Herb Henderson right now on The Law Works.
The following is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The Law Works is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the West Virginia Trial Lawyers Association, the Defense Trial Council of West Virginia, and by ALPS, providing protection and peace of mind for West Virginia attorneys and their clients for more than 15 years. And FindLaw, offering an online directory of more than 1 million attorneys, plus self-help legal guides for consumers and businesses. Find answers, find lawyers, find law on the internet at findlaw.com.
Recently, at the Greenbrier Resort in White Sulfur Springs, I had an opportunity to talk with one of the leaders of the civil rights movement. He was not only a leader in the movement in West Virginia, but in the nation. He was an officer in the Army when it was first integrated, and he was the first African-American graduate of the George Washington University College of Law. He served as acting general counsel for the NAACP and served as president of the West Virginia branch for 20 years. My guest is Attorney Herbert Henderson. Mr. Henderson, you have been, I suspect through all of your life, active in the civil rights movement, and that included the civil rights movement in West Virginia at the time of the decision by the United States Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. Can you tell us what led up to that? Was that a decision that was inevitable?
I think that's very true. The time frame we have, the decision actually was in 1954, and I can tell you a little story about that because I was overseas at the time, a first lieutenant out of West Virginia State College of an artillery battery. I was the boss guy there, and we got old newspapers. In about June, I was in North Korea as an Army officer, and I got a hold of the New York Times, and it had this stuff about Brown versus the board. It had headlines and all kinds of things, and we got the newspaper. At that point, I had already made up my mind, and even though I would have to take a lot of science courses, and I was going to go to med school, I read that paper, special edition. I read it over and over. And doing that, I had a vision at that time. I said, forget being a doctor. I'm going to be a lawyer. And then I came back and entered into law school in 1955, and that's how I ended up. So I really wasn't a part of that. And after I finished school, I came back home to West Virginia from McDowell County, from GW, and I decided to spend my life with the NAACP to try to reach out and help people. And I never had a goal as a lawyer to ever dream about making any money. It didn't really matter. And some of the cases that I've learned the most about and most proud of, I never received one nickel. And I'm proud, I'm very, very proud of it. And in my civil rights, I've done things for women, for Caucasians. It really didn't matter to me. Client's a client, as you well know.
What was it about Brown that caught your attention?
Well, I was familiar with what had happened after I think at that time, all of us African Americans, we knew about Plessy versus Ferguson. We just knew about it. The separate but equal doctrine was propounded. Now, actually, the Dred Scott decision basically said African Americans were not citizens. They were not even people for a long period of time.
Dred Scott was an escaped slave who was captured
in one state and went back to, he went into a free state and he came back. They filed a case in court, and they basically held that he didn't have any rights in court or anywhere else.
He was just basically a bale of cotton.
That's right.
Returned.
And Plessy versus Ferguson espoused a theory that we can have it separate and equal. So it's okay to discriminate. It was the beginning of apartheid in America. We had legal apartheid in America through the judicial system and through the legislative system from 1896 until 1994. America had apartheid. There's no such thing as separate but equal. For example, I grew up in McDowell County, and I played football, and I did some other things. But in a black school we had, for example, you talk about equal but separate but equal. We were so happy when the white high school would give us their football uniforms after they used them 2 years, because they would be pretty good for us. They weren't going to buy any for us. We used the shoes that the white kids had used for 2 years, and we'd get them. We'd get their books, we'd get stuff. They'd tear it up, but we were so glad to get it. That's what you call separate but equal kind of education that a lot of us had in terms of books and the things that you had. But we had other things that helped us, a great set of teachers and other things that helped. So you talk, there's no such thing in school, the school system, as separate but equal. And even though you may have a school or anything else, to force a beautiful little black chocolate girl to go into a restaurant or something like that, and she knows that she has to go there because of the color of her skin, it warps her for her entire life just to be a part of it. So we're talking about sociological things rather than the physical schools as much, although my emphasis at that time was to get good new books and to get good football uniforms, even though we had to take them from the white kids in McDowell County. And that's true. We reminisce, old-timers in the African-American community, how we got the clothes, or the uniforms, I should say, from the white schools, and we were glad to get them. Or, for example, in McDowell County, where I live, both schools, the black school and the white schools, were about the same distance. And the white kids would be bused. We both were bused. The blacks were picked up at about 5:30 or 6, and they would take us in the dark to the black school. Then you go back, you turn around, come back to the same communities in the upper part of McDowell County, Mayberry, and there, in those places, and you would pick up the white students. They're going to go same place. And I started figuring that out, you know. Then in the afternoon, the school let out about 3:30, I think, at that time. White kids went home, right?
On the school buses.
Right, and we waited. And when they came back, they come back and get us. By the time they got us and got us home, it's dark then, just about. And I always wondered about that. And I asked my dad one time. I said, well, Dad, why couldn't they just have the white kids around here on this side of the bus and the blacks, and we wouldn't have to get up like 2 hours early and get home late? He said, oh, boy, that's just the way it is. And I said, I didn't understand it, but I really didn't. But there's no such thing. And when you take the mind of somebody in an early age, at the age of 2 or 3 or 4, and you teach them that they're inferior intellectually and all other ways, that's with you for life.
That causes damage.
Total damage. That's what the Supreme Court's case was about, of course. It's a sociological decision. There were 30-some sociologists who gave papers to the Supreme Court in support of the Brown decision. Every psychologist, a social worker in America who are experts all agreed that what the damages of going to a separate school and being changed different.
I believe during the 60s, all of the states in the Deep South will come to see the futility of resisting the Supreme Court's desegregation decisions, and while we will not have complete integration by 1970, we will at least be moving on towards some form of compliance, even in the most resistant and recalcitrant states at the present.
That was demonstrated through tests and interviews with young children where they were given choices of
The dolls.
Dolls, dark dolls, light dolls. Which one's better? Which one do you want? Which one would you like to be?
And that black child would always pick up the white doll. Why?
Why do you think?
Because they had been indoctrinated that white's right, and that's the best way to be, and white's superior to the blacks because of the place they were in life.
That hurts you even now to talk about it, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. When I think about law school, when I think about so many things that happened to me in America, you know, that's the idea of inferiority of African Americans to whites. The problem is that even notwithstanding what the sociologists said, most African Americans never bought into that theory. I mean, I don't know any black that played football with me or went to college with me or anything else in my whole life that ever said anything about, well, I think I'm inferior to white people. On the contrary.
Where did you go to college?
West Virginia State College, the best state, West Virginia University now. That's the best school in this country, in this part of the country.
Was it an integrated college when you attended?
No, I don't think so. Faculty was, but I don't think there were any any whites at that time. I think the whites came after I left for the Army on my second time. I had been in the Army before, and I got called back in the Army again, and white students start trickling in about 1954.
How did a black man in the early 50s become an officer in the Army?
Well, you went to, I had been in the reserves. I had been in the Army when I was 17, and I got in the reserves. And I got called back in the Korean War, and I didn't want to go. At least they didn't want me to go because they wanted me to play football. And they said the only way you can do that is take ROTC. So I went and I took ROTC. I figured, well, it's about over now. When I get out, boom. As soon as I graduated, I got this telegram telling me to report to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to the artillery center there.
Was the Army integrated at that time?
Yes.
President Truman ordered that the Army.
And that's one of the things I think we Americans can be, we mountaineers can be very, very proud of. A lot of us took ROTC, African American males at West Virginia State. And we went to the artillery school. It's about 6 months. And if you didn't pass during a week, you had to have a score of 75. You had to go to a night class. And they were all officers. They were there from Harvard. They were there from Yale. They were from all over the country. All of us were black artillery officers, and we went to that school. And I really appreciated West Virginia. None of us ever went to school that night. The guys had master's degrees. We were all undergraduates. The ones that went to West Virginia State College, hey, I said, I thought they said I had an inferior education, but we did it, and we just didn't. And I went through with honors and everything else, and I ended up in Japan, and then ended up going from there to Seoul, Korea, and then taking a light plane and go up north, Kumwa Valley. And I was just an artillery officer, and one day the colonel called me in. He said, how many times have you been up to the top where we go and live for a week to see what the Korean people were doing? So he said, come here, Henderson, how many times have you been up? I said, I don't know, sir, 7 times. And he said, how old are you? And I said, 20, so and so and so and so. He said, what are you going to do when you go back? I said, well, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to med school, I think. And then he said, we got 3 officers down there, and they have more seniority than you. He says, do you think you could be a commanding officer of a firing battery? I said, no, sir, no. And he looked at me a minute, and he said, stand up and come over here. He says, now you're a first lieutenant, and you're commanding officer of the able battery, firing battery. And the word went out like mad, you know. They got this young black guy up there, is in charge of everything, you know, and I enjoyed it. I didn't just get it that way. But that's the story I tell you. But I worked hard to be an American officer. And,
you had to be better, didn't you?
5 times better. When I left Japan, coming back, to the States. I was a colonel, and the two-star general came to the airport and literally begged me to stay in the Army. I was proud of that. And some of my buddies were there and witnessed it. In Japan, in Tokyo, they said, you stay in the Army, you could go straight to the top. I said, no, sir. You can go straight to the top. They said, you're young. You'll be a major at the age of 28. You're going to be a colonel. They say, you're going to the top. We've looked at you. We've followed you. I said, no, thank you. I said, this is the way it was. I'm not a military, but I'm proud of the 2 hitches I had.
You said you felt you got a really good education at West Virginia State.
I do, as good as anywhere.
Did you enjoy your time as an undergraduate in college?
Oh, yeah, at West Virginia State. Mm-hmm. Very much.
Did your teachers treat you appropriately?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where'd you go to law school?
George Washington University.
Why?
Because I read in the paper that they never had an African-American to go to law school, and they were kind of proud of it or something. And I decided that that's where I want to go. So I applied after I made my decision that I want to go to law school rather than medical school. And I was accepted. I think because I was an Army officer at the time. They didn't have race or anything. I wrote a letter.
They didn't ask about your race?
Well, they did. And then it's a quirk to that. I was accepted. I came to Washington, D.C. And people at the Urban League, African Americans, they found me and asked me to come meet with them, executive director and 2 or 3 other people. And they said, how many, you've been accepted to George Washington? I said, yes. They said, what kind of student are you? I said, B, probably B. I might get a few A's, I say, every now and then. I'd probably get C's too. I don't worry too much about it, but I can pass, you know.
Grades do not necessarily reflect the intelligence of the person receiving them.
Exactly. So they said, what we'd like for you to do is go to American U, or go to Howard, or go to Georgetown. I said, what? We want you to go to one of those law schools, and we'll help you get money. I said, what do you mean? He says, we know that they're going to flunk you out if you're just a B student. We want a black to go in there with IQ 900. That literally is what they were saying. And I used a profanity, and I said, no, I'm going to George Washington. And I was there for 3 years by myself. I never had any friends. None of the white students ever interacted with me, socially, otherwise. And the African-American lawyers here know that I'm the only guy that ever went to law school for 3 years, didn't have any kind of relationship with any single student. They never even talked to me for 3 years, just by myself. In the beginning, it was those days when you smoked, and I would go out and there'd be 2 or 3 white guys at a 10-minute break, smoking, and I'd smoke, and they'd get up and move. I wasn't paying any mind. It was about 4 months that I decided that every time I go where they were smoking, or even at the coffee place across the street, right down from the White House, everybody would get up and leave. And then it finally dawned on me. I talked to my wife. I said, they don't want to have coffee with me or anything. She said, well, you know what you got to do, you got to do. So for the rest of my time in law school, I was by myself. I knew they had old exams and all that. I didn't care. I just studied, and just went on. But I didn't have any friends. Nobody ever. I tried to, in the beginning, to force myself just to be friends. And a side note is, in that class was, I think, 2 women, 2 white females. And I kind of watched them. They didn't do much better than me.
The law was a closed institution in those days.
Oh, yes.
Could you join the ABA, the American Bar Association, if you wanted to at that time?
I didn't have any money. I don't really know. I guess maybe so, but I was lucky just to.
We've talked in times past with Dennis Archer, who's the president of the ABA, and he's told us that it was into the 50s before a man of color would be accepted. In fact, sometimes they were searched out to see if they qualified in earlier times, qualified by reason of race.
Is that right? I really didn't know that. I thought the reason I didn't join when I first got out was I didn't have any money to join. Basically, I was a poor lawyer, you know.
Well, you came out and you started practicing law where?
Huntington.
West Virginia.
Yes. That was a tough time.
Who were your clients?
My clients were court appointments by the federal judge Watkins, which I received no pay.
But that was not because of your race. They just didn't hire a court or didn't pay court appointment
well,
attorneys a lot in
no,
those
I
states,
was the
did they?
one that was always. I was the only black there, and when the judge came, Judge Watkins came from Fairmont. His bailiff was a black guy, and he said the judge wants you, and I had to go over there and volunteer and give my services for maybe a week or two in federal court. And all the white lawyers knew when he was coming, and they'd all hide. And I ended up representing him. They were 99% white, and I worked real hard at it. It was a hard life. It was a real hard life. The only place that would serve me food in Huntington was a 5 and 10 Walgreens, and nobody else would. And I would be in a record room, and I have poor people. You didn't get any pay. You got $50, I think, to represent somebody in a murder case. Every now and then I would do some title work or something, and the lawyers there, white lawyers, they were very friendly to me, a lot of them. And I noticed after a while, when lunchtime came, about 10 minutes before lunchtime, they would all kind of sneak out. You know how the record room is in a courthouse, with the deed books and all the books. And I'd look up, and there was nobody there but me left all the time, you know. The guys were going to lunch. And then I finally dawned on me. I was real slow getting this thing, I'll tell you that right now. And they said they didn't go maybe because they didn't want to be embarrassed because nobody would serve me. So I just did the best I could. And you being an Army officer and proud and all like a mountaineer, it's hard, but you know, I just figured this is the system and I'm going to fight it. Ever since I was in Huntington, all of 40-some years of that practice, my practice was probably between 92 and 5% white.
9 out of 10, better than 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I represented people. And my white clients, they didn't care what it was. All they want you to do is represent them.
You did other things beyond the traditional practice of law.
NAACP, I was a state conference president for 20 years, and I was involved in civil rights litigation and also as a civil rights person for the state, African Americans in the state of West Virginia for a long, long period of time. And that included trying cases in my capacity, for example. As a state president, we filed a lawsuit and that we made a mistake. Frank Cleckley was helping me. And I was...
Frank Cleckley is a former justice of the state Supreme Court, law professor at West Virginia University, man of color.
That's right. And we decided that I couldn't be the lawyer, too. So Frank, take my name off, put Frank's name on there. You're the lawyer, I'm the lawyer, but I will be the NAACP. So this is, we went before Judge Hayden, our dear friend who passed recently, and he said, now, you're the lawyer, Henderson. I said, yes. I said, no, I'm the client. Cleckley is the lawyer. And he got the superintendent of the schools in there, and Judge Hayden said, Mr. Henderson, and I forget now who the head of the state police was. He said, you see that room over there? He says, discrimination against African Americans as troopers and the state police, that's wrong, don't you agree? And he said, yes. He said, oh, Mr. Henderson, he agrees. He said, well, you go, the two of you go in that room and you stay as many days as you want to. Mr. Cleckley and I, we're going out and do whatever we want to do, and you all settle this case. And we went in the other room, just him and I. We went back and forth, and I wanted a certain number, and I wanted this.
You were integrating the state police.
Yes, but the law school was there. We were ready to, Cleckley was ready to move. I mean, we'd already filed a lawsuit and everything else. So we talked back and forth about getting blacks in. And after about the second day, and Judge Hayden didn't have anything to say, but we knew that Judge Hayden was going to rule in our favor. And we knew that. We had dinner that night, and we just, next morning, we start talking again. finally we came up with a plan to integrate the state police, and we did very quickly. And over the next couple of years, we got about 12 involved in it. But it was kind of funny because I was playing, as a state NAACP president, I was a client, really, and Cleckley was a lawyer of record in the case. But a lot of cases like that, I file, and some of the cases after a while were pretty easy. In my own home county of Campbell County, I sued to desegregate the school systems, and it was a settlement of it. They were ready for somebody to sue them, and I did a lot of that kind of a thing.
What period of time are we talking about?
I would say 60s, starting in the early 60s, and integration of places to eat and things like that. We had some counties were a lot worse than others. I wasn't practicing law at the time, but one of the worst places was where I'm being interviewed today, and that was in Greenbrier County.
We're talking today at the Greenbrier Resort in White Sulfur Springs.
And that was a tough one. Thurgood Marshall, General Counsel for the NAACP, in the fall of 1994, came to Greenbrier County and for the West Virginia State NAACP. And he told them that you can win this case. I think West Virginia is going to be easy to crack. And they filed a lawsuit here. And Judge Moore, white judge, federal judge, integrated Greenbrier County right on the spot. We won the case, and there was riots and fights and prejudice and all. That was a time, the types of things that the NAACP did. But we filed a lot of lawsuits, and we did a lot of them were kind of easy to do because normally a lawyer on the other side would say, you know, it was hard for him to say that's not the law.
Next week on The Law Works, I'll continue my conversation with Herb Henderson. Please join us. I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. If you want to know if you need a lawyer, you can discuss your problem with a lawyer by calling the West Virginia State Bar Helpline, toll-free, Tuesday evenings from 6 to 8 at 1-800-642-3617. On the LawWorks webpage at thelawworks.org, you'll find a complete listing of all the LawWorks topics and information about how to obtain copies of the programs. You'll also find additional information about this show's topic and a great deal of other legal information on the LawWorks Legal Resource page, powered by FindLaw. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, you can send us email to thelawworks@adelphia.net. The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia State Bar, the Mountain State Bar, the West Virginia Trial Lawyers Association, the Defense Trial Council of West Virginia, and the West Virginia University College of Law.
The LawWorks is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the West Virginia Trial Lawyers Association, the Defense Trial Council of West Virginia, and by ALPS, providing protection and peace of mind for West Virginia attorneys and their clients for more than 15 years. And FindLaw, offering an online directory of more than 1 million attorneys, plus self-help legal guides for consumers and businesses. Find answers, find lawyers, find law on the internet at findlaw.com.
This has been a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.